Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Becoming Relentless podcast. I am joined by my lovely co host,
Danielle Kusenberger.
and we have a special guest, Dillon. Sorry, I stole
Dillon
your
Phaneuf.
entrance. Do you want to say your name again?
That's okay. Yeah, Dillon Phaneuf. I'm boring. I've been on a few times already, so I don't think anyone's too fired up about it necessarily. But hopefully, we can provide some value today.
Absolutely,
Thank you guys
yes.
for having
We
me
are
on
so
again.
happy. We have something a little bit different for the podcast listeners today. We're going to do a Q&A like we've done in the past, but this one's going to be a little bit quicker paced, and we're going to dive into some spicy topics, some more
Spice.
potentially controversial topics, which I love.
More exciting.
Yes, very
Let's do it.
exciting.
Let's start. I want you wanted to start with PEDs, and I want to hear your question on that.
Yeah. Okay, let's just dive right in. So one of
Dive in,
the
Noah. Go ahead.
main question themes that I got was, how long should an athlete and a coach work together, or what is the considerations for starting an athlete on PEDs?
Sure. Do you want me to take off with that in a little bit and see what I think,
Yeah,
and you guys can weigh in? Sure. So I think that it's I'm going to try to be quicker than I normally am. So I think that it's very, very individual, for one, right? Like, how long have you been competing? Have you just worked with you're at nationals, right? So for instance, we can use you, Noah. If you just came to me as a client, it's like probably having some experience, probably you're checking the boxes, most of them, and maybe there's some improvements we want to make. It could be fairly quick, to be honest. Like, within 3 to 4 months, like, we might go through a quick health phase, maybe a recon phase, like whatever we need to do based on the person. But then we're probably going to get back to moving the goal forward, with which PEDs in your goal case is probably always included, right? So it's like part of the map. Versus if I get someone who's never done a first exposure and I know nothing about them or their history or their diligence towards staying on a program, how their psychology is, all of that stuff, I'm probably going to wait, at least 6 to 12 months, and ideally sometimes up to 2 years. So it really depends on the person, what division they're shooting for, what reason they're even considering using PEDs, and sort of what their life encompasses and looks like.
I think you hit on everything I'd consider. The one note I will add as like part of the question that I got to is, as far as bringing up the conversation, I think all of us, we probably have that conversation or the opening of the door within our intake forms. Like, I'll ask on the intake form, on the application, have you ever used PEDs? Are you interested in using PEDs? So I have that answer right off the bat, if they are or if they aren't. And so that conversation can come up whenever. I think the person who asked me who should bring it up, if you're thinking about it as an athlete, go ahead and bring it up to your coach. But I will say, don't message them and say, what are your thoughts on XYZ? Ask them the question that you truly want the answer to. Say, I think I've been checking the boxes. I think that I'm ready. I would like to explore this with you. What do you think? Give them that opportunity to understand what you're asking. Because if you just ask them a very vague question on PEDs, they'll give you the educational answer. I know I would. I'd be like, oh, here's what it does. But I wouldn't understand that you're asking for you. So be very specific with your questions, but don't be afraid as the athlete to bring it up with your coach.
I love it.
I love that. I love that. I think that's bang on. Really good addition. And in some sense, I think you guys will notice this too. If someone asks one of those vague, foggy questions, it's usually because they know they're actually not checking the boxes and doing all the other things that they probably should be. So they're kind of coming with like a front. They want you to look at the front question, not what's behind it, because they know that if you're a coach worth your salt, you're going to say, yeah, I have no problem discussing this with you, but here's what I want to see into the future, and it's probably going to require
I have
a
a
lot
few
more responsibility
athletes
in your
who have asked this as new athletes. They've been training for what, like 8 months to a year, really training. But they hit a plateau and they think, based off, you know what people preach on Instagram, the next step is PEDs and that's going to fix everything. When in reality, there's so much more than just PEDs. And especially with plateaus, there's a lot that goes into that. So asking the questions straight up with the direct answer that you want to know versus a vague question is very beneficial for the athlete.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. So I have one that kind of ties to this actually, if we want to just kind of used it. So there's actually like two questions I'm going to combine in one because it was from the same athlete. So I'd like to provide some value there. So it was the first chunk of the question was, if all health markers are good, but menstrual cycle has not returned, is it a good time for another cycle? So this is a really easy part to the question for me. The menstrual cycle returning, granted that there wasn't some crazy autoimmune condition and that things were not good before for a specific reason, very unlikely based on the way the question was asked. It's an oxymoron question because your health markers are not good. The number one health marker, I don't give a rat's ass about the blood test necessarily compared to like female biological physical function. So if menstruation still hasn't returned, your health markers are not good.
Right.
That is the health marker, the number one health marker, or one of them, let's say, and it's not checked off. So no, it's not time to start. It's time to investigate. That's your clue to investigate as to why that hasn't happened. Fix that, hold it for 3 to 4 months, and then consider based on blood work being
Along
good
with that
at that
too,
point.
once an athlete can get their menstrual cycle regular and get that health marker prioritized on track, they're going to see progress just prosper. And I think a lot of athletes who have the same issue, they don't have their menstrual cycle but think that PEDs or they want to start another cycle to see more progress happen. I promise, if you focus on getting your menstrual cycle back on track month to month to month to month to month, you're going to see the progress that you want and need to make.
I completely agree with that. Noah, do you have anything to add to
The
that?
only personal experience I've had with that is like my menstrual cycle is irregular, but it has been since I got it. Like as a teenager, it's just been like either very, very long or very, very short. And so with the addition of PEDs through my own trial and error, I've found my normal, like within the irregularity. So sometimes if I'm after like post show, if I'm stressed about, oh, my cycle hasn't come back, it hasn't come back, I've found that actually prolongs it. So if you're somebody who is, a higher level competitor, you're looking to start another cycle because you're looking to compete again soon and you're doing back-to-back shows or whatever, my best advice in that case would be just kind of relax and let the cycle come back and take that time because like Dillon was saying, it is a very important health marker. And the more that you stress about it, the more likely it is that cycle is not going to come. Your menstrual cycle is not going to come because you're stressed about it.
Same thing with digestion issues. If you focus so much on your digestion issues and they control your life, you don't sleep because of it, it's going to get worse because your stress is so high.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are very good points. And actually, just to tail end to Noah's point very quickly, I think that this person didn't ask from this perspective, but let's say you just did, national pro qualifier, you qualified, and in 9 weeks or 11 weeks, it's just that's the way it works out that you're going to shoot to do that pro qualifier. In those rare instances, sometimes you push the line in our sport, and I understand that. But this is not being asked from that perspective, and those people aren't asking these questions. So that's a really good way to look at it. For you, Noah, I can pick on you just slightly a little bit also, because I know that some of those cycle issues, I was just going to say, and then you kind of called yourself out. I was like, I bet you if I talked to you for 4 hours straight, we would find about 8 dragons of stress that are probably causing that irregularity, but you already know that. So it's something to continue to work on into the future. I did have a sort of a tail end question that I could loop on really quickly to that one, which is, and I think it's because of the cycle design she may have used, and she's trying to reverse engineer if this is why her cycle is worse than it is, etc. But anyway, it was asking, is Masteron a layering drug, or can you use it just solely on its own? And that's actually a pretty good question. And for females specifically, yes, you can use pretty much anything individually, or I don't like the word layering drug, but yes, you can. Masteron's a DHT derivative, so that is going to, potentially help with some of the androgen issues that some females might struggle with. However, this is why it's very important to have a coach who tracks your biofeedback and knows what they're doing, because some females respond better to androgen-based drugs, right? So it's not like a guarantee. Like I think the industry has moved towards like females get DHT derivatives, primobolan, they get Masteron derivatives.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine, and those are great tools. But I have some females who do a little bit better on like a test and MPP in short durations with the dosage being kept in mind, obviously for the person you're working with. But so
Right.
that's a little bit individual, and that's why it's so important to have a coach who tracks cycle design, not only your performance and body composition through that cycle design, but how your biofeedback was. And then when I get blood work at certain times, that's how usually, and this is a good point to make, people think that they're going to jump into their first or second exposure and like have this magic. Usually, yes, there's a bunch of like physical results, but usually they can be optimized for how they feel mentally, how their sleep is, and how that affects their biofeedback by tweaking things over time, because there's such a genetic bio-individual response between the responses of these
I love that
products.
point. That was a very important point to make.
Yeah, it is super individual. I found that like through all of my different cycles and exposures, it's like certain.
Right.
Mhm.
You start to
Exactly.
experiment.
And that's the thing
Yeah.
too, is like it's okay to have a little bit of that trial and error. I think everybody goes in wanting their first or second cycles to be perfect and, like you said, magical. Like it's going to change everything. But everybody's individual. You don't know how you're going to react, and you kind of have to be okay with, okay, we tried this and it got this result. How can we make the next time a little bit different, a little bit better, a little bit more optimal for your body?
I like that. That's a really good addition. And I think again, it's not that you're not going to see results in the first few times, but from experience, when we get into second, third cycle design, at least working the way that I work with clients, that's actually usually when we start to feel the best, and we have sort of the dosages and the compounds figured out that are going to be very responsive, not only to their physical, but their psychological and just internal health development
I
as
agree.
well.
Perfect.
I had a fun question for you guys, and I think that it's really fun just because of the dynamic of who's all sitting here, specifically you two. So the question is, what do you think the biggest difference is between an amateur and a pro?
Shots fired. I'm just kidding. I would say
I knew you guys would look at each other and say nothing
Well,
for 10 seconds.
I have a lot of answers to this.
Go for it.
Number one would be how an amateur executes is usually vastly different than pro. But I will say an amateur that's going pro within that prep executes like a pro. So, for example, Noah's a pro, but I execute like a pro because the goal is obviously to get the job done this time. A lot of amateurs don't have that same mentality that the pros do, but I will say it also depends on the show because some shows are so much easier to go pro at than others. And then at that point, it's really what do you do as a pro on stage?
That's correct. I like that.
Yeah.
Noah, what do you
I think that the difference is the experience. As an amateur, you're still learning, and every show is a learning experience. As a pro, it's the same, but once you've reached pro, everybody at the pro level has gone through the same sort of experiences, the same losses, the same wins. Like they've won overalls, they've won their classes. They've also probably, missed their pro card by a couple spots. Like they have that experience of competing, of the journey, the process. And so there's a little bit more like mental maturity there that I think separates. And like as a new pro myself, I think the biggest difference I've realized is mental. I've had to go through a lot of mental growth because I'm a pro, but then my mind had to kind of catch up to that. I have to conduct myself a certain way, and I think sometimes amateurs don't always see that big picture. But I would say biggest difference is probably mentality, and then also just like executing within protocols. The level of adherence that you have to have as a pro to really do something as a pro. I mean, you can be a pro athlete and be not very good and like not really be on your protocols and kind of scrape by. But if you truly want to go to the top, to the next level, you have to be on your protocols.
I will say, too, one thing that is different from this prep versus past preps, and I know you'll agree. Pros, throughout your prep, you have one goal. And the way you operate is around this goal on stage, right? a lot of amateurs try to have this balancing mindset towards balancing life at the same time as balancing prep while they're achieving their goal. Personally, with this may just be a personal thing because of my mindset and the way that how hard it's been to go pro at. But I have learned through my preps that I have to make my life surround this goal and forget about balance. And that's how I operate best, and that's how I personally get to the next level.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah,
The prep
that's
that took
a
me
great point.
pro, nothing else mattered. And it was hard, really hard. I did not have balance.
But it's a lot of fun too.
It was a lot of fun. Achieving that goal was incredible. And not having the balance is what took me there. And I loved it. I embraced it. But just know, like, if you have that tunnel vision and you're going in and you go pro, you also need to realize, like, after that, there's going to be a little recalibration because you can't operate like that forever. You can't have that no balance forever. You could, but your life won't be very fun because I had relationships to repair. I had time to spend with family and friends that I just didn't during my prep. But I made that choice willingly because going pro meant that much to me.
I love it.
That makes a lot of sense. That was a really good answer. I'd like to add a little bit to that. One of the things that you guys both just described, so I'll start there and work from the bottom up. That's the hunt. Like, we're a hunting and tracking creature. So I think it's really interesting when someone says, I want to do this extreme thing. It doesn't matter if it's getting a raise, moving across the country, like anything that's going to require some very diligent work, some conceptualizing, mapping, execution, why they're concerned about balance. Because like, if you just take this back through evolution, it's like if you had to catch something to eat or forage something to eat today or find water, you're not concerned about like, how your hair's looking or balancing anything. That is the goal until it's no longer a problem anymore. And everything sort of surrounds that. And then you recalibrate. Like, okay, well, now we've gotten to the end of the target here, and now we recalibrate. So I think that's a really good point. And I want to separate out the genetic anomalies from my answer, because there is people that, like, to be honest, what's the difference between amateur and a pro? Genetics, a lot of it. However, at the pro level, so if we're just using pro as general, most of the people's genetics are pretty good. So there is people whose genetics are so crazy. We all know, heard of those one people who can like basically not even diet or do cardio into a show, even as a pro, and do very well. Even that is so rare that it's not worth talking about, because no one should model their map over that map. It's just very unlikely that that's you. If you're asking the question, it's not you. So just like normal pros and normal amateurs who are striving, I think the difference is expanding, being able to expand that time horizon. And Noah kind of chatted on that a little bit, where like they're looking to the long goal and they're not letting their emotions and feelings dictate their actions in the short term when life is going to throw problems at their goal. Life doesn't give a rat's ass about the fact that you wanted to be a pro during that prep. It still gave you family issues. It still gave you maybe some health stuff. We're always dealing with these, and that's forever. So that's why I always say, like, you have to start. It's not like when my life is perfect, then I will start trying. No, you try now, despite the fact it's not perfect. And as your life gets better, you'll be on a Pareto distribution path towards that goal. So I think when people are sort of laying this out, they start with the wrong framework, right? So like for me, it's not the pros never make the small things too benign, right? Like if someone's weighing their peanut butter as an amateur, it's like, oh, well, it's supposed to be 15 grams. And like, oh, I licked the spoon, but it's actually 22 because what was hanging on the spoon. That's little shit, leaving a rep in the tank. And, I learned this from Matt Jansen, getting to be around him a little bit. It's like learning to ride the midline is the saying that he had, right? And that stuck with me. It's like riding the wave. You're going to have highs and lows, and you shouldn't be just looking to stay on a high the entire time. It's just that your actions don't change regardless of when you're in the valley or in the peak, right? And I think a lot of amateurs allow their emotions to dictate their path on a short term because they don't trust themselves, and they're in a continuous self-sabotage loop. And pros seem to find a way out of that by expanding 100%. Their time horizons.
I love that. I will say too, one thing that I'm doing a lot more, which I believe most athletes do this, especially pro athletes, is they ask themselves the question, especially in the beginning of their prep, of does this action or this time with this person or this XYZ help me towards the goal? And if the answer is sometimes the answer is it doesn't, but it also doesn't not. Sometimes the answer is that it truly just takes you away from the goal and progressing, and it's a waste of your time. And being able to know that and say no to that thing is a very strong place to be and a very controlled place to be.
Yeah. And I really like the point that Dillon made too about looking at the long term and kind of being able to channel that through the prep. So, just a personal, like, quick anecdote was peak week going into nationals right before I got my pro card. I got in a car accident and totaled my car. It was like 6 a.m. A car T-boned me. Like, my car was undrivable. I called Zach. I said, hey, I was on my way to cardio and I was in a car accident and my car is totaled. Can you drop me off at the gym? Because I have to get my cardio done. Like, my mind was I was like, we'll take care of the car stuff later. I have to do my cardio. And my parents were just like, okay, no, you're strange, but we love it. And like, it just, that the goal was so high in my mind. It was peak week. I could have easily been like, oh no, my car, my stress, like freak out, like don't do my cardio, all this stuff to derail me. But I was like, no, this is peak week. Like, I have a goal in front of me and I'm going to achieve it. And who cares about the car? Like, I'll deal with that later. One step in front of the other. Like, cardio is what needs to get done right now. And that's what I did.
Priorities. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's another
exactly.
that's exactly the mindset that makes you a pro though, because it's choosing where your energy goes. And if you choose your energy to be focused on the car, it's taking your energy away from where you really want it to go in the goal. So you're choosing to place your energy towards your cardio, towards what really matters in that week and moment.
Exactly.
That was really, really good anecdote. Thanks for sharing. That's the kind of stuff that people don't realize. They don't see it on social media when you're up there signing off on your stage photo, and you look great and you got your pro card, all that stuff. They don't see all that, right? And we try to fill people in, but they're just snapshots,
Yep.
So there's one more quick question if we have time for it, because I think it's really good and I think
Go
it's going
for
to
it.
provide a lot of value. So, yeah. So the question is, how do you know when someone is ready to start a prep? Okay. And I want to take a little bit different angle of this. Okay. So I think that we could just go back and listen to the first question about starting PEDs, and it's basically the same thing. Are you checking your boxes? How long have you been training? So it's very individualized. But I want to take this apart from a different angle, because I've been hearing this nonstop. And I'm an obsessive thinker, as you guys know. And it's every client that I get, almost male, female, regardless of, and I've been getting more and more competitors, and it's all the time. And because of where my experience is, it's a lot of first, second, third time competitors, right? So they're still building their confidence and figuring out like where their place is going to be on that journey. And this question is it's sort of so obvious to me that we've instantly gratified society more and more and more and more, because people are so unwilling to make a move forward unless they know what they're going to get. Like, it's been asked in 10 different ways, but this question is the same thing, because if you're ready to start a prep, if you're nailing your shit, right? Like, when I was coaching with Justin put me through my first PED exposure. I'd been natural for 7 years and been nailing my shit progressively, like it took me some time, but I'd been nailing it forever. And it was like, I know I'm ready. I don't have to really ask him per se. Like, there might be some minutia he'll be able to answer, but for the most part, like, I know I'm ready. And people are asking that question, knowing that they're not doing the things that they should be doing oftentimes. Secondly, it's a Kierkegaardian leap of faith. Anything good in life. I'm opening a gym right now. It's very stressful. I have no idea. I don't know if people are going to come, and I have my life savings invested in this. It wasn't like, hey, can someone tell me that we're going to have a certain amount of members in a certain amount of time so that I'm willing to put this money up and put my ass in the line, my vision, my dream? No. You jump off the cliff and then you figure all that out. That's literally how nothing gets achieved at a high level, regardless if it's competing or anything else. You have to decide that you're going to do it. And that's literally the adventure of a lifetime. But we're so used to being safe and comfortable that we want to know that we're going to like have the cake if I'm willing to do the walk.
And like you said, it's the adventure. Life isn't as exciting or fun if you know the outcome of everything and if you win at everything. If no offense, I think you'll agree. If both of us went on our first show ever, overall, pro, all the way up, great, fun, like cool, good for you. Like it would be we would be burned out eventually because there's no challenge. There's nothing fun about that. You're not really winning. You're just doing. I love what you said because I think people play life so safe and comfortable, but there's nothing fun about life when you do that. And eventually you get bored and then you feel like you're in a rut and you can't find motivation. But it's because you haven't really challenged yourself to get uncomfortable ever, or in the past year or 2 years or 3 years, because you're playing life so safe that it's just boring.
You're bang on. And this is tied into, I'll be very quick. This is tied into, I can always tell when someone's asking that question the way they're asking it, they're stuck in a self-sabotage loop because they're not doing the things that they know they should do. And then there's a guilt, shame, blame cycle that starts to happen, and they can't trust themselves. So they know they can't trust themselves. So they're looking for a safe outcome to prevent the feeling of failure that they're looking to stave off at all or into the future. That's not how it works. You don't know, and it's because you're viewing things as too black and white. Things are not failures, things are lessons. I've fucked up many things in my life and I continue to do so. And the hope is that I learn from those lessons, take the wisdom and apply that to myself, my own life, and the people that I'm responsible for caring for. Right. So it's something that if you really can get your mind off of that and just tell yourself, like, well, what if I gave it my best effort and just seen what happened, and no bullshit. I'm going to really do this to the full potential of a human being's capacity. You'd be very surprised at what someone can achieve when they take
something
that mindset.
I've been learning, like as a coach, just through experiences, as my athletes ask me, like, how do you know when I'm ready to start a contest prep, or can I start a contest prep? Every time they ask me that, I ask them back a question, because often, like you said, they're either asking because, one, they're bored and they want to start something new and exciting. They're not executing to the best of their ability, and they know that if I'm like, oh, you want to start a contest prep? Oh, let's do it. Then all of a sudden they're on 100%. But on the flip side, if I say like, oh, you're not ready, like you need X, Y, and Z, then I've given them the excuse of like, they're like, oh yeah, like I'm not ready. I can continue to not be at my 100%. So every time I get that question, I just ask them back. I'm like, do you think that you're ready to start a contest prep? How are you feeling about a contest prep? Like, I try to dig into it because more than likely I get down to the bottom of it and they're like, well, I just don't feel like I've been giving it 100%. And I'm like, okay, if we're not at 100%, we're not ready to contest prep. That's just it. I'm sorry. But
right. So you just exposed very simply exactly what I was talking about with the framing of how this question's being framed. Most people, so here's something interesting. When you're a little kid and you break your mom's lamp and then you clean it up or tape it together and try to fix it, you're just in a state of continuous anxiety and negative emotion. And you're not very smart as a kid, so you're probably going to get caught, like we all have, doing something stupid. You're actually relieved. Once the punishment is over, even if you're grounded or whatever, you did something bad, now that you're relieved. So I understand that that's what clients are looking for, actually. Like you saying, like, hey, because making them say it is different than you saying it. Having them come out and say, you know what, I haven't been as good as I could be. And I was thinking that like a contest prep would make me do it in some sense. But in reality, I know that I have to do it. And if I'm really interested in this goal, I'll start doing it. I'll prove it to myself first off. I'll prove it to you. And then we will discuss that. It's relieving. And that's where you can get through your own bullshit and actually start off a proper launch pad. When you're starting off from this whole, what am I going to get and where's it going to go and how's it going to go, when you're not even executing on the right small macro, you're certainly not going to execute onto the large macro if you're not nailing the small macro and the micro, right? So
contest prep is not the answer.
No, definitely not.
It's not. It's like having it's like if you're struggling, that's the equivalent of like getting pregnant to fix your relationship.
That's actually like spot on. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's like I'm not laughing at that from like a place of like, oh, I know better, because I've absolutely done that. I've absolutely been at a place in my life where I'm like, oh my gosh, things are out of my control. Hey, Justin, should we prep? And he's like, no. Like what? Like you can't.
Well, that's why we're here. That's why we actually all love and are passionate coaches. I'm not speaking from moral
Yeah,
high
we've
ground.
done
I'm
this.
speaking from personal experience. I
Mhm.
shamed myself into competing a bunch of times because I hated what I had. And yeah, you can derive some motivation, let's say,
Yeah.
but it's dark motivation. And we don't operate very well just running away from something we hate when there's nothing we actually want to be running towards. And I didn't have that part clear, which is what caused me to go down my own psychological rabbit holes of problems along with my life, let's say. And that's what caused me to solve myself out of those problems that I now get to help people
Exactly.
with and pass that gift
Yeah.
on.
That's why we're all great coaches.
There you go. I think
Thank
that you
you.
guys are fantastic coaches. I really like chatting with you. I appreciate you guys having me on. I know we had a little bit of a hard stop here today. We got limited time. So that's probably a really good place to wrap it up, I think, unless
This
you
is
guys have
perfect.
something else
We
to
really
add.
appreciate your time.
Yes.
Of course, this was really fun. And I know there's going to be a lot of value here. And I know that we can continue to expound on some of these
Yeah, I
topics
really
and
love
just
this
help people.
podcast, and I hope that everybody else gets something from it. I know they will. They absolutely will. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will
Awesome.
catch you on the next Becoming Relentless podcast.
I hope y'all really enjoyed the podcast today, leaving it feeling more relentless than ever. But we have a few things that we would love to ask of you, so I'm going to give this over to Noah.
Thank you guys so much for listening. If you could, I know that this is your new favorite podcast. Please leave a 5-star rating and review. Leave any comments and questions below, and make sure that you're sharing across social media so that all of your friends get to listen to the greatest podcast on earth.
And if you have any questions about any topics that we talk about or anything at all, fitness, competing related, anything, we comment, we'll hit you back up, Instagram or in the podcast under, if the comment box is there, then we will definitely answer your questions and help you out as best as we can.
Absolutely. So leave those 5-star reviews. Let us know, and we'll talk to y'all again soon.
Have a relentless day.
Bye.